There should be proper and thoughtful debate about what politicians can bet on. NHS England's medical director has warned there's likely to be widespread disruption this week. The latest strike by junior doctors starts tomorrow morning. Parts of the country experiences a heat wave. Professor Sir Stephen Brown says the impact of soaring temperatures on the elderly and vulnerable could make the 5-day walkout over pay very hard. The American journalist Evan Gershkovich appeared in court in Russia at the start of his trial on spying charges. He spent more than a year in jail on espionage allegations that his employer, the Wall Street Journal, and the White House have called completely fabricated.
Thank you, Jane. It's 26 minutes to 9. Now, in recent years, John Kerry toured the globe, tried to make deals to save the planet on behalf of President Biden. Whenever he was in town, he came here to the Today programme studio to talk about what he was trying to achieve. Now that job as the President's senior advisor for international climate policy has been taken over by John Podesta. A name may be familiar to you. He was Chief of Staff to President Bill Clinton, Councillor to President Barack Obama. And yes, he is in town for London's Climate Action Week. Let me talk to him.
I have been at the White House since the Inflation Reduction Act passed. I'm working on the implementation of that bill to make sure that the United States stays on track to create an investment-led strategy that will cut our emissions in half by 2030. I've now, after Secretary Kerry departed from his role, I picked up some of the effort to ensure that we're continuing to lead in the international arena as well, coordinate with respect to COP. I just came from Oslo, where I was at the Oslo Tropical Deforestation Summit, and trying to move all those lines of work forward, because obviously the task is great and it requires everyone around the globe to drive things.
Now, the positives about the Inflation Reduction Act
Well,
is that it's large amounts of money given to American businesses to invest in green technology. Some of the people I imagine you're meeting around the world may say to you, well, hold on, isn't this American politicians?
Well, I think it is American strategy to cut our own emissions, but I think it has insurance companies as well. Those technologies that could pass as much as 200%, which is good for the climate on the road, and the ability to make key emitters of emissions makes the CO2 that we produce in the United States is for reasons that we and tons produce in the world outside the United States as this technology spreads. So I think we're all going to be tested. The President wanted a war that's outside of that country. It's going to be it's private sector right to make sure that we're building industries, creating jobs, creating benefits on governments and transition your economy away from fossil fuels.
We're days away from a general election here in the UK. You are days away from a day away from a presidential debate, 10 weeks away from a presidential election. You know that you'll hear wherever you go voices who say, what is the point in China investing in Ukraine with ingenuity, with Indonesia, which is huge credit because say it's our turn now, and polluting the planet, and say we can't afford as citizens to pay the prices that are not. Do you hear that as you go around, or how do you answer it?
翻揾翻呢件 P3 出嚟。
Requires us to have strategies that
Okay.
help those countries, particularly countries like Indonesia, countries where emissions stop cutting down the forests, which they actually had some success in doing, moving away from coal. That's what the just like the transition partnership with the UK and the US participate in working on. But it means pressure on China. China is kind of seems bad about this. They're not on this topic. They're now the largest producer of wind technology. They've deployed 232 gigawatts of solar power last year, but they continue to build coal, and they can't continue to do that if they're going to keep 1.5 degrees of
Is it too soon to say, as some I think in this election cycle, that the Chinese are moving fast to sell us green technology as we allow them to use dirty technology? see what happens.
Well, I think it's really important to understand, particularly in the trade process,
我睇嗰度
the way you use those critical goods, not just how you transport them, is really important.
哇，
You
犀利
have to take account
哇爸爸點返屋企啊
working on this,
好慘啊 哥哥 你仲笑
I would just note from China is 60% more
Oh, no.
than the United States or Canada. So, you know, we need to take account of it. But it's a job for everyone. Look at the heat that's coming forward around the world in this summer. And we just all need to do it.
One final thought, those elections. We've seen what's happened in Europe with the rise of parties that are campaigning against green measures. You can see what's happening in your own country. How worried are you that when Americans go to the polls in November, they may well vote to stop the very thing that you're arguing for in this new job as the President's senior advisor on international climate policy?
Yeah, the green investments remain popular in the United States. There's no question that the former president has different views on climate than the current president, and that'll be a topic for the public. But I think particularly the investments and the jobs, the business creation in the Inflation Reduction Act are quite durable. They're there for 10 years, and I think we'll keep them.
John Podesta, Senior Advisor to President Biden for International Climate Policy. Thank you for joining us. Thanks.
It's 2010. Let's turn our attention to something in the Post for Royal Mail workers. They may be offered a share of future profits if a cheque billionaire's offer to buy the 500-year-old company is accepted. The full offer will start arriving by post, appropriately enough, in the letterboxes of over 100,000 small investors from this morning onwards. Daniel Kretinsky is trying to address concerns in unions and in government about the sale of part of the fabric of the United Kingdom. Simon Jack is our business editor. Tell us a bit more about this. It sounds like part of a process, but also an interesting thing for people to receive.
Yeah, I mean, one of the key asks from the unions was some kind of participation in the future fortunes of the company if and when it gets bought by Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. Now, in the official offer document published just an hour and a half ago and on its way to the mats of lots of small investors is a promise to look at some kind of profit share mechanism. So it's trying to address those concerns. Union boss has told me in the last few minutes that they also want to say in management as well, as on pay boards, etc. It's not clear he's going to go that far, but they are talking, and unions are not flat out rejecting it. Neither, I should say, are the Conservative and Labour Party politicians, who both say they do not object in principle, but will scrutinise some of the commitments he's made, which include keeping the Royal Mail logo, HQ, honouring current employment agreements, and the one price goes anywhere universal service, which is currently under review anyway. But
Okay,
in 1 and 5 years, which in the history of the company, whose first name was Henry VIII, is either a blink of an eye. But as I say, none of the parties say outright they are objecting to this in principle. So I think the impediments this can go through are look like they're being dealt with one by one. But it should be said that the share price this morning is still some way off the price of Mr. Kretinsky's offering. So it's clear that a lot of investors think this is going to be a tough deal to get done, and there's a lot of work left to do.
And I suppose for those who may receive this in the post, I mean, what's the right response?
Well, the Royal Mail share price has been enormous for the last 3 or 4 years. And at the time of privatisation, the post office was separated from the post office. Current employees, qualifying employees, got around 900 shares in the business. They still own 5.5% collectively. And Kretinsky is offering them nearly £200 million for that stake. Now, some of these
Why is that?
when they were working there and now retired, might like that cash resources. 50% more than they were worth before the Kretinsky showed policy. So some people will be tempted by that. Having said that, Mr. Kretinsky already owns 27.5% of this company. The other shares are owned by the big shareholders like BlackRock and usual suspects, and he only has to convince 50% of them to sell to him. At that point, the deal will go through. But, of course, that is subject to the government keeping their tiles on it. It can be reviewed under the National Security and Investment Act, and that's when those guarantees and how long can we be sure that you're going to stick to these promises, that's when that decision will be made. So nothing will happen clearly this is the side of the election, and it remains to be seen which Secretary of State for Business will actually make that decision.
Indeed, all to play for in many ways. Simon, this is thank you.
17 minutes to 9. It's a donation for the Argyle Heritage Tree, which the Cardiff Food Bank declared yesterday. The Swifties amongst you may have just spotted that donation. One of Taylor Swift's songs on the morning after her first ever gig in Wales. The donation was take that as good job by the Chief Executive of the Cardiff Food Bank, Rachel Biggs. Morning to you. Kind of a surprise phone call, not by her, but nevertheless.
Good morning. Yes, definitely not the kind of phone call you expect to take. Not my typical Thursday last week, and not my typical week so far.
A phone call that said what?
So a phone call from someone in their team saying that they'd like to make a confidential donation, and then said it was someone from Taylor Swift's team, and they'd like to make a donation to Cardiff Food Bank, and that Taylor Swift herself would like to pass on her thanks and support for everything that we're doing at Cardiff Food Bank. So I've passed that message on to all of our team, to all the staff and volunteers in Cardiff Food Bank. But also
爸爸喺前面停喺度，俾你落聲好冇？
to raise the profile and shine the light on the extent of poverty in the UK. So it's great to be able to talk to you today.
Well, to do that for us then by reminding us, telling us perhaps for the first time, what is the scale of need that you're dealing with?
And thank you. Yeah, this is why the donation means so much. It's about having this platform really. So
Bye-bye.
So Cardiff Food Bank, we provided last year 20,000 emergency food parcels to people in need. But if we look wider than that, according to the Trussell Trust, 1 in 7 people in the UK are facing hunger. And last year, food banks in the Trussell network across the UK provided 3.1 million emergency food parcels. So in terms of the scale, it's enormous, it's huge. We think it's not right and it's not sustainable, and that change is needed, and that everyone should have enough money for the essentials.
A quick last word, if you wouldn't mind, Rachel, which is, I know you don't want to reveal exactly what she gave you, but enough to make a difference.
Of course, I say it's so much more than a donation. The fact that we can come on have this opportunity to raise the profile, shine the light. If anyone needs a food bank or is struggling financially, please reach out for support. And also an opportunity to say thank you to those who are supporting their local food bank already.
Well, you use that platform very successfully. Rachel Biggs, Chief Executive of Cardiff Food Bank. And thank you for coming on. Thank you for the work you do.
14 minutes to 9.
Booing cutthroat at the manager. England may be on top of their group to the knockout stages of the Euros. They're very joy from England's fans. Doesn't Gareth Southgate know it? Has he been clear after the match? I understand it. I'm not going to back away from it. The most important thing here is that the supporters stay with the team. I understand the sort of narrative towards me, and that's better for the team than it being towards them. But it is creating an unusual environment to operate in. I've not seen any other team qualify and receive similar. Well, we're going to get the analysis of Sam Wallace, football writer, in a second. Quick word though, first of all, Paul Farrell, landlord of Churchill's Sports Bar in Skegness. A lifelong England fan. Is it more than disappointment this morning, Paul?
Yeah, frustration, disappointment, and when you get those two combined, I think it creates a bit of anger as well. We just don't expect performances, not free performances, bad performances from England like that.
And do you feel that down, Paul?
Well, you do really, I mean, if you're a fan, we do spend a lot of money to travel, all over the world to watch England, it costs us, and we go, I mean, football, the adage says it's a game of two halves. I go 50% to the country that I go to, embrace the culture, and 50% to football, because over the last 30 years, the 50% of football has been absolute rubbish, South Africa, Brazil. So, to get to the country and enjoy the culture, that's been the bonus of travelling with England fans, and obviously the atmosphere as well.
I'm sorry I laugh, but it's because of, as an England fan, I feel that. Thanks for joining us. Also on the line, Thomas Cannon from the Football Supporters Association. There is anger, isn't there, Thomas? Not just disappointment.
Yeah, it felt like there was some anger last night, definitely a lot of frustration. More so because we know we can do better with the players we've got.
Yeah. And, there are a few only who are chucking those glasses at Gareth Southgate, but as you took the loop last night, you were more kind of doing a good spirit.
I mean, no one's unfortunately talking about the glasses, but you know, that's ridiculous. But there was just definitely a lot of frustration. You know, we can definitely play up that now, and I just we said there, fans are spending a lot of money, they're entitled to that frustration.
And like you see, Scotland fans, what an amazing display as their team got knocked out with that, let's be honest, not a great display, but there was great pride taken. Why is it that England fans are different, or is it because you deluded yourself, or we deluded ourselves, that we ought to win rather than merely hoping that we might win?
I think the expectations are high, but I think they're high for a good reason at the moment. Players that we've got, some world-class players, so you would think we'd be able to see a side Slovenia or Denmark and Serbia quite easily, but we haven't yet.
Yeah. Well, let's turn, if I may, thank you very much indeed for your time, Thomas Scott Cannon, to Sam Wallace, Chief Football Writer for the Telegraph newspapers. What you heard from Gareth Southgate, and I think this is the serious thing on the morning after that night before, is a man saying, you are doing to this team what people did to me and my team back in the 1990s, something that it took decades for England to deal with. Do you think that's right?
Yes, I do. I think unusual environment was quite euphemistic, really. I mean, what it really means is hostility, and as we know, we don't have to relive the whole history of the England team, but they've been there many times before. I mean, one of your previous callers mentioned South Africa and Brazil World Cups. I mean, those were Brazil, England were basically out before most teams had played their second game. Southgate has changed that, he really has, and he's taken away a lot of the further playing for England, but we are a political moment now, and a lot of it does point to what team he selects. I think we can all agree it's a very talented pool of players.
Just refers to the burden, you and Sam. I'm sorry to interrupt, but in a sense, we're here to sort of not so much about football tactics and players and so on, but that burden. You're saying that even for a kind of great youngster like Manu, who we saw on the pitch, the danger is it's actually no fun to play for England because supporters make it no fun.
Well, that was the reference that Southgate made, that playing for England has been fun, and we lose that at our peril. This is the history of the England team, that it's an inheritance, and a player, a brilliant young teenager like Kobbie Mainoo, inherits that anxiety from the fans. Southgate has been able to keep it at bay, but it's very much here now in Germany.
He's giving us a warning, isn't he, Gareth Southgate, I think?
He's fighting his corner, and he's trying to remind people of where England have come since Euro 2016 and that defeat at Iceland when he took over one game into the Allardyce reign. So he's trying to remind people of how far this team's come and what is important. But I'm afraid in the kind of bear pit of tournament football, and when a few drinks have been had, that a lot of that tends to go out the window.
Sam Wallace of the Telegraph is in Germany with the team. Thank you very much indeed. I hand over nervously to Emma, two Scots. Proud Scots.
Let's tell you who they are, but they're not to talk about football, or maybe I might come into it because it's just over a week until polling day and the general election comes to a close. A Conservative politician in the Welsh Parliament is the latest to be investigated over a bet on the timing of the general election. Russell George is the fifth Conservative to face inquiries by the Gambling Commission. And towards the end of the day yesterday, Kevin Craig, former Labour parliamentary candidate, was suspended by his party after he said he made a stupid error in betting he would lose his bid to become an MP. We were hearing from Michelle Hussain, our colleague, just a little earlier about the final head-to-head this evening on the BBC between the prime ministerial debate between Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. Alistair Campbell is meeting, former Labour Communications Director, co-host of The Rest is Politics, and also the new book about politics for young people called Alistair Campbell Talks Politics, amply. And Fraser Nelson, the editor of The Spectator, is here. Good morning to both of you. Just to start, we'll come off it, but with the election betting probe, because more people are being added to it, it is a developing story, as we say. Fraser, just to come to you first of all, do you think rules need to be changed or not that much?
I think it's moral understanding. Technically, it might not be illegal to vote in the time of an election if people have insider knowledge. But I think all parties from now on should recognize that nobody who works for them should be placing bets on politics. It just looks like insider dealing, even if it's not technically. This is one of these classic cases where the law says something that the court of public opinion says another. And this is very new that anybody gets caught doing this previously. And the idea that the Gambling Commission
campaign was somehow weak, is to better than previously even written. It was unheard of. It's a bit like the MP's expenses scheme. They never thought that when every football game would do
And Alistair, on our rules side, do you think that both parties and all parties should come out with clear rules?
Well, on the way here, I think guidance, players, and coaches work professional football better. And it's very, very clear. You work with John Worthing, you ensure that in your story. I don't think it should be so in politics. And you should understand that the biggest betting in the world is the next presidential election. Betting on politics is a big thing in keeping large sums of money. And so I think we need to put that not as in because when you talk about inside trade, when you know there's a connection with the markets and that people ship lots of things, that ultimately is a crime. And I don't think we should do not to inside politics. England should not be able to bet on anything where they want information and anything where they're able to influence the future.
It's interesting then taking a step back. So I remember on the program just a couple of weeks ago we were talking about trust in politicians and what level that's at. And there's now the issue of what will affect as you go in, post vote, you go post vote. So when you're looking at this now, where people are at and what they're taking in, it's interesting to take a step back and see the choices and see perhaps how other parties are doing as well. Reform, the Greens. What's your view on that? Where we're up to with other parties?
Well, in terms of gambling.
No, moving away from that, what's actually impacting how people will choose who to vote for and whether they'll vote at all?
I think the big factor is that the reform voters actually what will be the effect of their votes. If you see them to endorse something like the version of conservatism, and then you see the polls saying actually it's about policies. When you work on the Veracruz person who does the nemesis for the champion of conservative values, when he says, well, he does what you can choose one, and really, if this guy is conservative or conservative like conservative plus or simply a sort of shouty Trumpian classic European populist. So I think the malleability of the reform vote will be the big question mark in this campaign. The campaign, by the way, will probably 20% of what you're so I think that will be the big surprise. We've seen some of those people before ahead of the conservatives. I think tonight we're going to have the Sunak and Stonewall vote, and it's funny to think that in some polls Sunak is no longer the second candidate in this race. So we know people that are really serious, and we know people very few elections even close to this extent, because nobody's quite sure whether 17% of the public saying they vote for reform will actually do it.
And disillusionment and trust, Alistair?
No, listen, thank you for mentioning the book. I'm going to loads of schools at the moment and talking to a lot of first-time voters. Some of them are unbelievably excited about the prospect of voting. I mean, really, really quite excited. But others really look at politics like a sort of strange spectacle that's going on with nothing to do with their lives. And my big worry from a Labour perspective at the moment is that I think a lot of people are thinking, I don't need to vote because this election's all over. The whole narrative since the start is all over. That's a really dangerous thing for Labour. Because if you add that into general apathy, general cynicism, I think once people start thinking that somebody else is going to vote for you, then you're in trouble. So I think we've got to, for Labour, I think in the next few days, I really hope for this time does this in the debate, it's got to be about the things Labour will do to make change. I really hope, and I thought Michelle was brilliant in the first debate she did, I really hope tonight it doesn't become the sort of scrap that it became in the first ITV debate, because this is the moment, I think, for Labour really to give the positive reasons why people should vote for them.
What about shy Tories, Fraser? Some of them not so shy, who probably subscribe to The Spectator, but what's the element there?
You shy Labour out at the moment.
Oh yeah, the Spectator's readership, by the way, right across these parties. I mean, so this is very interesting. I mean, our readers are writing in saying how torn they are in this.
Yes, and that's what I'm trying to. Yeah, I think it's interesting.
And of course, with the shy Tories, of course, that will be the turnout factor will be something that can rock at the polls. How many of these people, when asked sensible voting Tories, will actually make the journey to the polling booth if they are so downhearted? And of course, Rishi Sunak's great pledge was he was a sensible man, a man of decency and honour, etc. That's why the gambling scandal is just so fatal, because it seems here that there's an air of sleaze covering even Rishi Sunak. And I think that deterrence factor will be the biggest thing the Conservatives have to worry about. How many of their voters will actually
So on the question time, with our colleague Fiona Bruce, that some said he seemed tetchy, he seemed irritated. Do you think we'll see a different man this evening?
He's not suggested he's tetchy, but I think he thinks he's put down a lot of the ground. I was slowly surprised at his own criticism.
But all he did very well again, Keir Starmer perhaps not as well in their very first one that you didn't like. So you usually see Keir Starmer as this evening.
I think Keir accepts that he was talking about it straight away and he kind of stayed there. But I think he was genuinely shocked that Rishi Sunak launched this £2,000 tax rise, then kept doing it again. I think he was genuinely shocked. I think he's got better as he's gone through the campaign. But I really hope, I think from Rishi Sunak's perspective, this I think is his last chance to show that actually he's capable of doing this job. I don't think he did do enough more favours to be as tetchy as he was. I think he should try to rise above it. And I think for Keir, let's be honest, most people are looking at thinking, you're probably going to be the next Prime Minister. I think for him, it's to reach out to those people who still don't know, who are still thinking maybe they won't vote, reasons why they've got to walk out and vote.
Well, you've got to see what happens in the booth, and some have already voted, as you said. Alison Campbell voted yes. Thank you.
8:15 tonight, BBC One. Watch it, listen to it here on Radio 4. That's it from us today. Thanks for listening and great day. Enjoy yourself.
BBC News at 9 o'clock. BBC Newsnight has learned that up to 15 Conservative Party candidates and officials are being looked at by the Gambling Commission with alleged betting on the timing of the general election. It's understood the regulator will be carrying out inquiries this week. Cabinet Minister Niall Stride has defended Rishi Sunak's handling of the betting issue, telling the Today programme that he'd acted decisively.
The Prime Minister is very angry about what has happened here, although we don't know the conclusions of the Gambling Commission's investigation, but very angry about anybody who has broken the rules in these circumstances, has taken very decisive action in withdrawing support from two candidates, and made it further very clear that in the event that the Commission does decide that rules have been broken, they will be expelled from the Conservative Party.
The Scotland Secretary Alistair Jack has said he placed 3 bets on the timing of the general election. Jack denied when the election would be called and said he wasn't being investigated by the Gambling Commission. Jack is standing down at the election. Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak were asked to the audience in Nottingham tonight. BBC One debate was the election campaign and broadcast at the broadcasting. The WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has walked out of court a free man for the first time in 14 years after reaching a treaty with the American government. The 52-year-old found his way home to Australia following the hearing in the US Western Pacific Territory at Saipan. He was pursued by the United States after leaking a large amount of classified military and intelligence information. The espionage trial of the American journalist Evan Gershkovich has begun in Russia. The Wall Street Journal reporter denies collecting secret information from the CIA about a Russian tank manufacturer. His employer and the US government have also vehemently rejected the allegation. England will find out tonight who they will face on Sunday in the second round of the European Championships. It will either be the Netherlands, Romania, Belgium, Slovakia or Ukraine. BBC News.
England's footballers may have so far failed to hit the right note, but no doubt Glastonbury will do the trick to entertain music fans this weekend. For many going, perhaps the experience could be improved without the queues for the bars and the toilets, and maybe with a better idea of how to get from stage to stage in the shortest possible time. So could AI help out?
About funding. We're always being told that Wales is funded to a greater level per head than England. This is true, but we're not funded as highly as, say, as London is. So is London better funded than Wales?
Well, government figures show us how much public funding different areas of the UK receive per person. It shows Wales receiving £13,967 per person, which is lower than Scotland and Northern Ireland, but 11% above the UK average. England as a whole receives £12,227 per person, so Wales is above every English region but London. London gets £14,486 of public spending per person. Per resident, that is the highest in the UK.
So the claim is true?
Well, we've got to always think about what drives this spending. For example, water companies are in the public sector in Scotland and Northern Ireland, but not in England and Wales. And part of London's high figure is because the capital, ironically, receives the highest capital spending in the UK.
by capital spending, you mean investment spending?
Yeah, largely driven by spending on transport and in particular the railways. It benefits not just those who live in London, but those who travel in to work.
Right, so I don't live in London, but I came to the studio this morning on the very expensive and also very effective piece of infrastructure called the Elizabeth Line. So that's London spending that benefits me, a non-Londoner.
If we excluded that and only looked at the current expenditure on services, Wales has higher funding per resident than London, even though it's historically been more expensive to hire staff and provide services in the capital.
And we might also want to remember that per head London pays in twice as much as Wales and Perth. Our economy relies quite heavily on London, so perhaps it's not surprising it receives a significant chunk of funding. Okay? An extraordinary number of loyal listeners got in touch to ask about a line from a recent article in The Guardian. And, well, they might, because talking to the paper about the discovery of microplastics in penises, Dr. Ranjith Ramasamy, who led the new research, was quoted as saying,
During an erection, a fifth of the blood volume in the whole body gets pumped to the penis.
Well, thank you for that, listeners. Could this be true? Dr. Simon Cork, senior lecturer in physiology at Anglia Ruskin University, looked into it for us. The claim is that a fifth of the blood volume in the whole body gets pumped to the penis. So we should start with the basics. How much blood is in a typical man's body?
A typical man is about 5 litres of blood in total.
1 fifth of the blood volume in the body then is 1 litre, which, I mean, I'm thinking of one of those chunky cartons of milk. So if that much blood is going to the erection, I feel I'm doing it wrong.
I mean, that was the claim. I think that's what it's
Okay, what is the truth? Are we talking about pump to the penis, pump through the penis? Talk me through what's actually going on.
So, during an erection, blood flow to the penis does increase. Blood flow is quite interesting because what happens is the arteries in the penis dilate, so we get the blood flowing into the penis more. But as it swells, the veins which take the blood away constrict, they get squashed. So what happens is blood kind of gets trapped in there. Unsurprisingly, perhaps there haven't been that many studies looking at the actual volume of blood which enters the penis during an erection. But I did find one study that was done in 1976 in Japan, which calculated the volume of about 32 millilitres.
Right, 32 millilitres, which is, I mean, gosh, that's just like less than a ladle. That's like a big tablespoon or something, isn't it? Certainly not a litre.
No, and I guess for comparison to the litre analogy, about a litre of blood goes into your kidneys every minute, and they are much more heavily perfused with blood. So if a litre was also going elsewhere, then perhaps you'd be in trouble.
So how much blood does flow around your body each minute?
So that's a term what we call cardiac output. So that is how much blood your heart pumps out per minute, and that is about 5 litres as well. So it's about 5 litres per minute of blood circulating in your body that your heart is pumping out.
While the process does constrict the veins to produce the erection, the blood does continue to flow and at an increased rate overall. Simon also found some research on that, this time from the US in 1993.
The flow rate is about 10 millilitres per minute during an erection.
Okay,
so think of TTs. Yeah. So that's how much blood is being exchanged per minute.
Right, which is, again, a lot less than a litre. I'm just trying to do the mental maths. So 10 millilitres as a proportion or percentage of the total volume of blood.
It's about 0.2%.
Okay, so if you wanted to get to this 20% figure, 1/5, you would need to maintain an erection for 100 minutes.
That's about correct, yeah.
You don't necessarily recommend.
It's actually quite dangerous. A prolonged erection can cause something called ischemic priapism. Because that blood is essentially trapped in there, it doesn't flow out very well, it doesn't get oxygenated. And so the penis can become deoxygenated, can become hypoxic, and it can be damaged as a consequence.
Right, so not a good idea to have an erection for too long. That's at least what I tell my wife.
I wouldn't recommend it now.
our thanks to Dr. Simon Cork from Anglia Ruskin University. Now, I should say this line was removed from the online article shortly after publication. When we asked Dr. Ramasamy, he said he had misremembered some research and apologised for the confusion. Last Wednesday, the results of a new poll were published. But not just any poll, it was an MRP poll, which I'm sure I don't need to tell you, stands for Multi-Level Regression and Post-Stratification. It's a big, fancy poll designed to give seat-by-seat projections of the election. MRP polls have come into this campaign with a strong reputation after past successes. So MRP polls get taken seriously, and this one, by Savanta, showed the Conservatives winning just 53 seats, a near apocalyptic result for the party. But wait, on the same day, two other MRP poll results were published, or dropped, as the psephological cool kids say. One of them put the Conservatives on 108 seats, another on 155 seats. Now, any of these results would be a huge defeat, but clearly there's an enormous difference between 53 seats and 155. So, what's going on? And shouldn't the wide range give us pause for thought? We wanted to talk to an expert, so I spoke to Paula Surridge, Professor of Political Sociology at the University of Bristol. I asked her to remind us how an MRP poll works.
So an MRP poll takes a large sample, usually 10,000 plus people, and it does that so that it can look at how specific demographic groups are voting. And then what it does is it takes that demographic information and projects it back into constituencies. So using census data, we know how many of each type of voter there are in each constituency, and then you can kind of add all that together and find out how your constituency will vote.
Now, last week, 3 different MRPs were published, and they all said the Conservatives were going to do badly, but they differed a lot in how badly. Is that range of polling results unusually wide?
Well, I think it reflects the uncertainty in these models that we're perhaps not used to analysing in the way we are normal polls. So these models take in data, and then the modelists add their assumptions. So they vary according to the input, the data, and those assumptions. And we know that even in the headline polls, we see variation. Some polls have Reform at 12, some of them at 16, some of them at 20. So that kind of variation then feeds through into these models.
Yes, you've got differences in whatever people are telling the pollsters. But what else accounts for it?
So there's a few things. There's the assumptions that the pollsters make and what goes into their models. So they're not all using necessarily identical sets of demographics to do that kind of reflecting back into constituencies. They're making different assumptions about how much practical voting there might be. They're doing different types of turnout modelling because we don't know what turnout's going to be at the election. And they're dealing with voters who say they don't know in different ways. Each of those is adding a bit more uncertainty into these polls.
Now we have this idea of swing, and there's clearly going to be a big swing from the Conservatives to Labour, barring a really astonishing polling surprise. What do these MRPs tell us about where that swing is going to be distributed?
So we're not really sure exactly how the swing is going to be distributed. Some models work on an idea of uniform national swing, where you lose about the same proportion of votes everywhere.
So if there's a 5% swing, then you just knock 5% of one party's votes everywhere and add 5% to the other party.
Yeah, exactly that. But what we've been seeing in local election results and some of the polling, and particularly in the MRPs, is something called proportional swing, where actually you lose a higher percentage of your votes when you started off with more. So instead of taking 5% off everywhere, you might take 20% off where you started at 50 and only 5% off where you started at 20. And that is much more devastating actually in terms of how seat losses then look.
Right, so that's worse for the Conservatives.
Yeah.
Or worse for whoever the incumbent is, which is currently Conservative. Well, this idea of exactly how the swing is going to be distributed is an important point of difference between the MRPs. A small difference in how they model this can make a big difference to the overall seats forecast. The more a model thinks the swing will be particularly concentrated in seats the Conservatives already hold, the worse their seat projection for the Conservatives will be. Of course, this uncertainty is exacerbated by our first-past-the-post electoral system, where even a narrow victory in percentage terms still means the winner takes 100% of a particular constituency.
It's a tricky election to predict, and it's particularly tricky when you have lots of seats that are on that kind of margin where a small change in either direction changes the outcome. And we've got lots of those seats in England. We've also got lots of them in Scotland in this contest. So the MRPs may still be working just as well as they have done previously. They may not. We'll see that after the election. But there is a lot more uncertainty with candidates for seats. We've got very big swings, and we've got a party that didn't stand before. So there's a lot of uncertainty going into those models.
Is there a danger zone where a party passes from being, a significant parliamentary player to completely insignificant? And can we say anything about what that danger zone is in terms of national polling?
I think it's quite hard to read from national polling because it depends how well distributed.
Surrounded by a family, by that love for a child needs. She told me that I wasn't reading her bedtime story as well as Harry. Harry, that's awful. How could you say? Terrible thing of being married. Love her. Upset. Wonderful Nana and Dad.
Off you go, Jingle. Just ready for
Stuff on us department to be much better good at it.
That does sound like quite a fact, trying to set up a whole house of flats. Jess, you actually had to leave your foster family when you were 17. What kind of support did you get?
So yeah, I lived with my family for 4 years and thought I had found my further family, but unfortunately, like a lot of young care leavers, the placement broke down and I moved to something called semi-independence, which comes in all shapes and forms, but for me, it was a one-bedroom council flat kind of thing. They completely funded that because I was 17, so they paid my rent because they had to because I was still a child. They paid for my rent and they gave me a weekly allowance of £60 a week for gas, electric, food shops.
So you were budgeting, you were having to manage that money and make it stretch.
Yeah, well, I was quite fortunate that I did work. I worked on minimum wage earning £12.60 an hour, so I got an extra like £250, £300 a month on top of that. But I really tried to budget that £60 a week because I wanted the money from my work to go on being a normal teenager and I wanted to go out and do normal teenager things, so I tried to budget that £60 so that my work money could be spent on me and not for circumstance.
Like most teenagers would. So you were managing that and you were doing your A-levels. It's a big ask, isn't it? What happened when you turned 18?
So when I turned 18, before I turned 18 and I had the conversation about moving into semi-independence, I did ask my local authority, when I turn 18, so I turn 18 in March and university starts in September, I said, when I turn 18, are you still going to financially support me whilst I sit my A-levels until I find out if I've gotten into university? And they said yes. And if they had said no to that, I would have never agreed to go into semi-independence because I didn't want to fund it myself, I was still a child. So I was under the impression that I was still going to be funded when I turned 18, but the week before I turned 18 I was informed that that wasn't the case. I do think that was just a miscommunication, and I don't hold it against anybody, but it was really frustrating and daunting and scary to think that the day I turned 18, I was going to be cut off financially, and I had to apply for benefits. I had to find a better paying job, which also helped, but then that is also a conflict because that meant I'd get less benefits to pay the rent because I was earning more. It was definitely stressful, that time between March and September, and it was just added stress to the A-level exams that I just didn't need.
No, absolutely. And now you're at university, how supportive is your financial situation? How much help have you got?
My local authority is really supportive and they really want us to go to university, so they do pay for my accommodation. I would say 80% of my financial accommodation costs are paid for, and I still get that weekly allowance, but it's gone up to £74 now, I think. So I get that on top of my student loan, which is really helpful, but it's unfortunate that not all local authorities provide that. It is up to the local authority what they offer you. I'm very fortunate that my local authority is very supportive, but the local authority next door might not be the same, so their children in care might not get the same support.
Yeah, and you and Callum were having a chat just before we came on air about how your local authority, Jess, is going to pay for a driving licence, but Callum, you have to jump through a few more hoops.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always told that in order to get driving lessons paid for by the local authority, I have to actually be in the job that required it. However, for me, I can't get into that job without already having the driving. So it's a bit of a difficult situation to be in.
Yeah, and just that one point that illustrates the difference between the different folks, which we will talk about more, but listen to them how it is here. Thank you for joining us. You put into the care system yourself. You know a huge amount of work in this area. You're doing the PhD I work for the Care Leaders Association, so really glad to have you on the program. You've spoken for research, you've spoken to about 60 how much stories like Jessica?
It's so common, and it's really outrageous to be honest, because when I think about these young people, and go back to my own experiences as well, we're already, we know that we're setting up on the back foot by being forced out at a certain age rather than when we need to leave and when we feel ready to leave the care system. And at the moment, we're doing all the things to improve things. We've got family privilege, for example, there's no one to go the hospital appointment and we can take them. If we do childcare, education, what that really has a financial implication and restricts the options that care experience have people have access to.
Seems as well like sometimes hoops and stuff, jump through to get what they're entitled to. And Jess had to make a case that she should come home, and once she turned 18, more
absolutely, and I've heard from research that actually it's those with the most needs that actually get access to this, or it's harder for them to access the financial support that they're entitled to as well. Some of those, for instance, are those with criminal justice experience, so I've spoken to people with criminal records, because of how to get skills to eat, because of how they have difficulty get food, and then once you get a criminal record, the care company can steal their food. So it's really tricky, especially for those who may have more complications to overcome.
But also trying to do Centre for Excellence in Children Protection, which is based at the University of Strathclyde, and Claire Wilson from the Care Leaders Charity. Thank you both for being with us. Welcome. Claire, care leaver provision is a difficult issue. Can you just explain what different financial support, so what financial support might be not to get in the care system?
Majority of care leavers receive universal credit upon turning 18, but they only get the lower rate for under 25s despite living on their own. That
think they're committed to change. We think they should get the over 25 rate, recognising that they've got people being superstars. We also get, and kind of sort of reference this, something's called a setting up home allowance, and that's to spend on essentials for your first home, but that's got to cover everything. So all your white goods, all your furniture, kitchenware, cooking equipment. Last year, the government increased that recommended amount to £3,000 for all care leavers in England, but we are consistently hearing from young people who are not getting that amount. They're getting much less than that. And then the final thing I'd flag around provision is that local authorities also have to publish what's called a local offer for care leavers, and that sets out what additional support that local authority will offer. So, for example, some may exempt you from paying council tax until you're 25. Some might offer to be a guarantor for a private tenancy, or maybe support you with redecoration costs. But it's a real postcode lottery. There's a lot of variation across the country, and it really depends on your local authority. You can see Jess nodding, so we will talk about that later on in the programme. But that topic that you raised there of increasing universal credit for care leavers under 25 to the over 25 rate, I can say that was addressed in an oral question in the House of Lords, so I can tell you what was said on that just in May. The Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, said then the government have assessed the impact of raising the rate of universal credit for care leavers under 25 in line with the rate for the over 25s. While we're not currently planning on changing the rate, we understand the challenges care leavers face. That's why we continue to provide additional dedicated support to simplify and improve their interaction with the benefits system and help them into sustained employment and rewarding careers. Kirsty, it's a different offering in Scotland, isn't it? I know there's a consultation taking place that might change some of that offering, but can you just talk us through how it works at the moment?
So Scotland has quite a lot of things in place to support care leavers financially. So, for example, all care leavers in Scotland are exempt from paying council tax, and the Scottish Government provides money to support students who have experience of care through the relevant funding bodies for further and higher education. And local authorities also provide some financial support to care leavers from the funding that they receive from the Scottish Government. A wee bit like the postcode lottery you've been hearing about, every local authority will do this slightly differently, but they often give start-up costs to care leavers to support with setting up a new home. So providing furniture, TV licence, perhaps getting the provision of driving licence. And this can be from around £2,000 to £3,000 and offered on that individual need and circumstances and choice. But like you say, what we don't have in Scotland yet is that specific kind of direct support to care leavers. I know the Scottish Government have recently consulted on this. It does vary, doesn't it? Just across the nation. So in Wales, they've got the Women and Ready scheme, which allows young people where possible to remain with their foster family until 21 or 25 if they're still in education. And there they also have the surveillance income, which is administered by local authorities and is intended to stand in for that kind of mum and dad support, like training, setting up home, transport, that kind of thing. In Northern Ireland, financial support is based on a number of different factors, including age and need. And care leavers there get financial support, again, to set up their own home, and they might be able to get assistance for expenses like education and training. Let's hear from Shelby next. She's about to go into the third year of her second degree in Scotland. She's studying to be a dentist. I asked her about what financial support she could get as a care leaver and student.
So in my first degree, I accessed the community games bursary, and this was essentially money you didn't need to pay back, which was really helpful, and it prevented me from getting into debt for a few years in my last degree. But now I'm on my second degree, I kind of have to fund myself, so you can apply for student loans, which is just it's open to anyone in a low-income household, but they now have the special support loan as well, which is like £2,400 top-up. It's going to be starting this year in September, so you can access both of those when you get like £11,000 a year, which can be helpful.
Right. And what about any extra help from university to reflect the fact that you're not getting financial support from parents and family that other students have?
Yeah, so there is some pretty good support available. So you can access scholarships. I currently get a scholarship. Then you can start in the middle of the year to support me, and
can also apply for things like discretionary funding, and that can be quite difficult for people because they look at your last month or 3 months of income, and a lot of us have to work over the summer because we're maintaining our own tenancies to pay rent. So when it comes to the last month, you have to kind of stop working so that your income will be reflective of that when you're a student. I think as well there's a lot more associated costs with being a care leaver, so things like having to maintain your own tenancy.
And then your food shopping, then your gas and electric, which is a lot higher now. It just didn't really set me up to prepare for that, and so I think it can be quite a struggle to manage my money. But I get by working.
陣間可能要
more fortunate.
要轉咩 change 嗰啲咩個 route
How to draw up a budget. This is how to make your money last the week or the month.
I think they did, but it wasn't really. It doesn't prepare you for the amount of bills that you then go out and get in the bigger world. And on top of that, they don't really prepare you for things like credit cards or loans, interest rates. That's not really spoken of, and I think that's a big thing as well. Because if you're in a property where you need to, say, get new furniture or fix a kitchen, you're going to have to then look to loans and things like that, and then you've got to add interest on top of that. You get to worry about. So.
Jess, you're actually saving money while you're at university, so again, you're doing a lot better than I did at the same age. Why is that important to you?
I will a bit my savings are quite low. I think it's good things doing my cost of funds and goes down, but for me, as I said, when I was 18, I was promised disappointed and I wasn't. So I'm kind of getting myself a little emergency fund so that when I do finish university, that I have got something to fall back on, because unlike a lot of my friends,
Daniel 係咪仲喺度等緊佢媽咪？
go home and I don't find somewhere to live.
佢媽咪喺個車嗰瞓着咗。
And it's a business
Daniel 個媽咪喺架車嗰瞓着咗。但係 Daniel 係咪會等緊佢媽咪？OK， 佢走咗啦。You don't know? So Daniel 今日有嗰啲 activities 啊。
I know care leavers, they might have had a chaotic, quite challenging background. It almost feels like they have to then be even better at managing money than their peers who haven't necessarily had those opportunities.
Absolutely, and as we said before, that there isn't as much or even enough to even live on. So when we're talking about, for instance, the setting up home grant, my research actually went and looked at every single item you might need in a new home, and it came out at more than double than that. And this is actual prices of items, and then we're expecting young people to be able to live on this, to pay their bills, and it's just not enough, especially when you have additional needs as well. So if you're a parent with that childcare support, you haven't got anyone there to turn to, and you want to go back to education or work, but you're so restricted because you haven't got that input or extra kind of buffer to say, okay, let's focus on childcare, so I can go into work, you have to turn it down because you don't have that option. So it really is restricted.
They are getting taught to want to and allow some extra cash to go out to buy more than carries of goods. Yes, I think that is the case, and we've been told by young people that it takes being to work with that financial exploitation is concerned. As exactly as you say, some students may receive money or more money than their non-students peers, and so there needs to be those direct supports in place for paying money that's being received to mitigate the exam. I think we should give the final word to Just what do you most want to understand, to know about the challenges that care experience face? What sounds
I think for parents and children to justify anybody who works in that industry, politicians, anyone who has anything to do with children's social care, that can be shit and dangerous. But this will be to my child, but this could be to my niece at 18 without even to my daughter. and making a friend for herself? And if the answer is no, then you need to make it a priority in your job to change that. And I think people don't realise that we grow up with foster care, but when we turn 18, those problems don't leave us. We live with this for the rest of our lives, and that means that we do need that additional support, because we're not normal kids, unfortunately. We are kids with struggles, and you don't stop struggling at 18.
What do you want?
I think that people often underestimate quite how difficult it can be. And I think that if you've got a wider support network as opposed to somebody that is just hanging out care, unfortunately, then that can be really difficult for them. And I think there's a bit of a lack of understanding there, so people try and educate themselves a bit more on the struggles of other people, and I think that it'll give you a bit of confidence.
Absolutely. And what's the life plan, Callum? Are you going to stay with your current caring role? What's it?
I hope to be a manager for something so down to career. So that's in my career plan.
It's a good plan. How do you want to graduate?
I'm looking to be on the other side of the sea, to be honest. I'm just journalist, I'm studying law, and the reason I want to do that is because I think having people like me in the media often will push over kids that especially don't think they can achieve anything that they want to do in the outcome.
Thank you so much for doing this. That's incredibly interesting. Absolutely. Thank you for
Lucy Woodham. I'm a presenter at BBC News on our TikTok and Instagram and other social news channels.
Kevin's never been to Glastonbury. Can you explain to him what it feels like and like how you navigate around?
Glastonbury is this magical little bubble. That's the best way to describe it. It's like being in lots of different worlds all at once. But because it's so big, I think it's 5 miles by 3 or something. It's like a baby city.
Yeah.
It is huge. So you really have to plan your festival around staging, timing, and how much you really want to see that person.
Okay, and this, I guess, gets to the nub of it for us. This is all about AI and what it's going to do to us and all of our experiences. How do you think it could help you there?
There's 4 areas I really think AI can help me out. One is with lineup management. The other is with bathroom. Third is with toilet queue, and the 4th is the route I'm taking to get from A to B to C to D.
Sounds like a real kind of like optimized strategy. It's like when you go on holiday, you're like, I'm going to hit this landmark, I'm going to do this, at this point I'm going to go for food. And I suppose like that's kind of eternal problem.
有冇幫爸爸個電話叉電？
Choosing one thing, you're not choosing
有
another.
冇幫爸爸電話
And
叉
I
電？
can imagine that at Glastonbury, something that's trying to choose one thing would just create massive FOMO.
Yeah, it definitely could. You might feel a bit bound to everything that the tech is telling you to do and the route to go, and yeah, it would be a shame if you missed just exploring. But the thing is, I really would genuinely use something that told me for it to shorter. I would 100% use it. I would rely on it for all 5 days. That is the worst bit of Glastonbury.
Oh,
You're
God,
really
I'm
gonna
done.
go and you're gonna keep it for that.
But do you not worry that your whole Glastonbury experience then becomes battery anxiety?
我交通燈
I literally take a portable charger every day. I'll take 5 portable chargers, 1 for each day.
Can you describe your best Glastonbury experience? Like the things that you want AI to like better?
I'm really trying to think about like my best experience and how I make it better. Yeah, maybe my favourite bit is basically have the whole day out, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you're walking back to the southeast corner. The day is done, but also the new one's going to start at like 6 hours. You've got to do it all again. So maybe the AI getting me back to my time that goes past maybe like a toasty food truck. That would be really good.
Alright, well, these are whatever you want to find out about now, what would be the question for us before mission was?
我幾慘呢度？
My
我翻唔到屋企
question
啊！
is, could AI make
翻唔到屋企啊！我哋覺得。
better?
I like that. That's very straightforward. It would make mine better because I've never been. Well, this is clearly a fan of the festival. It's interesting to know whether or not a logistically optimised experience of Glastonbury, where you queue very much for anything, is the same or is closely aligned to a best experience. You know, I reckon that they may not be the same thing.
It's difficult for people to verbalize what their best experience might be. And so how are the people who are doing AI defining that?
I think this is a very tricky problem. I mean, already in optimization tasks, I think Skynet is a very tricky
你做咩咁樣？咁樣佢哋啊，哥哥。
but I think it's even trickier still.
Yeah, I mean, it has been optimized, right? It has been designed. It is absolutely been designed for people to go down certain paths and to do certain things.
And it's very effectively
唔
marketed,
得，
isn't it?
我要同媽咪講。
What's been through some tense
好搞笑，
about
搞
it,
笑。
and it's been going ever since, but that's not what it is, right?
No, it is. I mean, somebody has done the poetry and the choreography. So what I want to do is I would like to speak to somebody who's done it. Because perhaps AI in the hands of Lucy may not be the right place, but maybe AI in the hands of is. So I have found somebody. We found somebody to talk with. His name is Stuart Braithwaite. He's performed at many festivals in his career because he was the guitarist in a band called Mogwai. They were founded in 1995, first year, I went to Glastonbury. And their 10th album reached
#1 in the UK in 2021. So they've been going for a good long time. But apart from being on that side of the microphone, Stuart is also part of the great ones in the past. And also here,
Air conditioning. Yes.
I think I watched one, and I think that the thing is interesting about the West End was a non-cynic review. Probably sometimes perhaps a rather rosy view, a rather emotional view. But I did like the fact he said, no, this is a serious world. And I sometimes think it's possible to imagine the inhabitants of 10 colonies could have tougher jobs than we do, and work longer hours, and face dire consequences, and know they're going to be sacked and maybe even killed. On the little side, not in terms of their performance, in terms of the stress and
Thank you very, very much. We've got to end it. Just time to remind people that Douglas is cancelled class tomorrow. June?
와, 뜨겁.
Thank you to Stephen.
와,
Also,
maybe.
thank you from the studio to James Boyd, the New European, Harry DeSalle, Jaylee Axton, and many others, but that's it for the media show. Goodbye.
Luckily we're going this way, right?
By Katie Mazel on Broadway.
behind the curtain on BBC Radio 4. I thought it was very interesting that this was about forensic psychologist, Dr. Sasha Dr. Lorenzo working with people
Yes!
investigative crimes. Taking the time to learn about a land that's led to prison without anxiety.
超級塞啊！呢度我翻，希望翻屋企嗰時係 OK， 希望翻屋企嗰時翻到屋企。
How did you get back home?
It's 5 o'clock.
OK 喎，翻屋企嗰時唔係好塞嘅，啲交通冇，啲 traffic 冇晒。
Welcome to the BBC election debate.
Election debate 嗰個。
Yes,
嗰個。
later tonight, Nottingham the Bar head-to-head, Starmer versus Sunak, fighting it out for 75 minutes. Will it change the course of the campaign? Will it teach us anything?
我睇下幾塞呢度，睇下幾塞。
Now, we attempted a somewhat powerful activate in Devon in Nottinghamshire, where, among other things, I've been speaking to some of the country's oldest voters.
They should all get together and get this country back to what it was. You want some nice people with stomachs in the head, but knows what they're doing, knows what they're doing.
Also on the program, street rebellion against tax rising in Kenya seems to have changed the government's mind. They will have the latest from our correspondent.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. And liftoff of Starliner Atlas V.
The Boeing Starliner got 2 astronauts up to the space station okay, but getting them down again seemed more of a problem than getting them But we'll start with the BBC News, read today by Charles Campbell.
Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer will take part in the final head-to-head leaders election debate this evening. The two men are expected to face questions about candidates being investigated by the Gambling Commission in relation to allegations of bets based on election. Yesterday, the Conservatives withdrew support for 2 candidates, and Labour has suspended the candidate. The Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey, has called for a review of the rules around politics today, as Alison McCarthy reports.
Ed Davey
爸爸你睇下要行
was
捷
a
徑，
bet on how well his party would do in the 2010 election.
呢度
He lost,
要個 short
but
cut
he said
嗰
he
個。
was as shocked as everyone else about the revelations of the last couple of weeks. A senior Conservative, Mel Stride, suggested there should be a wider debate about the ban, adding his personal view was that politicians shouldn't bet on such things. Asked if he'd ever placed a political bet, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said his only wager had been on the horses, and he argued the problem wasn't with the rules, but with politicians. The whole row is bound to come up tonight in the final head-to-head debate of the campaign, televised live on the BBC. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer will face each other, and a studio audience in Nottingham.
And you can listen to the debate on Radio 4 at 8:15 this evening. Labour has suspended a party member after being notified of their arrest in North London. Earlier, the Metropolitan Police said that a man was being held in Islington on suspicion of harassment after a number of men migrant working at Westminster received unsolicited flirtatious messages earlier this year. Our political correspondent Ben Knight reports.
The Express reported in April that several men at Westminster, politicians, parliamentary staff, and journalists had been targeted by flirtatious, unsolicited WhatsApp messages from mysterious figures calling themselves Charlie or Abby. Some were asked to send explicit images of themselves. The motivation for the messages was unknown and still isn't. Police have been investigating these messages since late 2023 and have now made an arrest. The man in his mid-20s was detained in Islington in North London early today on suspicion of harassment and offences under the Online Safety Act. Labour said it had suspended a party member after being notified of their arrest in Islington. The party says it won't comment further due to the ongoing police investigation.
An inquest has concluded that a law graduate who was sexually assaulted and murdered on her way home after a night out in East London was unlawfully killed. Jordan McSweeney attacked Zara Alina in June 2022, 9 days after he was released from prison. There were serious failures by multiple agencies to assess his risk of failure. Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon have been found guilty of hiding the birth of their baby, who was found dead last year after a 7-week search. They were also found guilty of the Old Bailey of perverting the course of justice in early pursuit of a breach in May that can only now be reported. The couple will face a retrial on other charges the jury couldn't agree on last week. Kenya's President William Ruto has withdrawn the proposed finance bill that would introduce new taxes following huge protests across the country. Yesterday, police opened fire on demonstrators in Nairobi, helped to say more than 20 people were killed. At the regional Elden Box reports.
President William Ruto said he had listened to the people of Kenya and had decided to withdraw the hugely unpopular bill. This is a major pressure for the tens of thousands of young Kenyans who took to the streets. With jobs scarce and the cost of living high, they marched to denounce the political elite who they view as out of touch and corrupt. To try to win some of them over, Mr. Ruto promised he and his cabinet would cut their own expenditure. This may not be over. There are plans for more protests.
The driver who crashed into a school in London in southwest London last July, killing 2 18-year-old pupils, will not face criminal charges. The CPS said the driver had an epileptic seizure which caused him to lose control of the vehicle. The parents, Maria Sajjad and Serena Now, said they were not convinced the investigation into their deaths had been conducted thoroughly.
Charles, thank you very much. Now, it's certainly not the end yet, but it is the beginning of the end of this long campaign. Voting is tomorrow. Many, of course, with postal votes will have sent their ballot paper already. In the last head-to-head one-on-one debate is
投票啊！你想爸爸投邊個？
broadcasting from today. And the constituency
你翻去睇嗰啲 ballot paper。
So can anything move
我哋翻去睇 ballot paper。
5 weeks on from Rishi Sunak.
We need money, we need more.
Late 51 weeks is one way you can see it. Michelle Hussain is chairing, and with a few hours to go, the spin room at the location is filling up. And we can talk to Leila Nathu, our political correspondent, who is there. And let's start, Leila, with how important this is for each of the parties. With the polls having moved a bit, but not having moved that much over the last 5 weeks, what's at stake here?
It seems like it looks like we have an infinite supply of mint.
We'll just skip some.
Possibly the last chance for them to really get a good look and a good listen to Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak before they vote next week. So both leaders will know that this is their chance to make this lasting impression in people's minds. I think for Keir Starmer, his strategy will be to try not to deviate at all from what he has said so far during the campaign. He doesn't want to say anything that might give rise to headlines. Remember last week in the question time he said that Jeremy Corbyn would have been a better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson. That got into the headlines the next day. He will try to be avoiding that. For Rishi Sunak, I think, given the way the gambling story has engulfed this campaign, in the last couple of weeks will actually just be trying to be heard, and will be using this as a task to really focus attention on core messages that he has been trying to get out during the campaign, and his core attacks against Keir Starmer. Because remember, it was the first head-to-head debate between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, in which we got that dubious claim about tax rises, which then, went on that course and the election campaign started discussing tax. So they are big moments. Of course, it's the last one. We're not likely to get sort of many new messages, new attack lines, as it were. But I think it is important, and I think both men will know that they will want to be remembered for the lines that they actually want to get across.
Leila, thank you for that. Well, it sounds quite noisy in that spin room already. Let us have our own debate here. Now, we don't have either Sunak or Starmer, but we have their allies. We have Labour's Bridget Phillipson, Shadow Secretary of State for Education, who is in that spin room a few miles from us. And for the Conservatives, Andrew Mitchell, the Deputy Foreign Secretary, also, and we were formerly in the 1990s, so this constituency will again Melbourne 18%, so that's just coincidence. Now listen, each of you, frustration on the massive issue of tax and spending, but the debates have shed more heat than light. Who has been more honest about tax in these debates and in the campaign? Bridget Phillipson first, what's your view of the debate on tax?
So we've been clear that everything in our manifesto is fully funded and fully costed, because we believe that the public finances are too important to be taken so lightly as they have been in recent years by the Conservatives. And we saw what comes of an unfunded wish list of policies that we got under Liz Truss, and sadly that's the path that the Conservatives yet again taken.
There's honesty about not making promises that you're not funded, but also honesty in terms of being frank about the possibility of certain rises in taxes, and being very clear that you don't have plans for it. But can you at least be levelling with us on the ground that yes, there may be tax rises. If the things turn out badly, if the growth doesn't get delivered, we may have to raise some taxes that we don't want to raise.
So firstly, we do know our economy is in a total mess. You only have to look around the country and your listeners will understand just how tough things are with the public finances. But within our manifesto, we've given a ironclad commitment that there will be no increases in income tax, national insurance or VAT, and nothing in our manifesto requires any additional tax measures beyond those that we set out. So for example, ending the tax breaks that private schools enjoy and reinvesting that money into more teachers, opening up the health support within our state schools.
And no plans for other taxes, but you're not giving guarantees on the other one.
They're not required to deliver on our plans. They're not necessary to
not
deliver what we
required,
set out.
but you're not guaranteeing you won't. Andrew Mitchell for the Conservatives, have you ruled out too many tax increases? Because last time you ruled a load out and then raised them anyway. And now we're here and we're ruling out tax increases again, and people may just say the Conservatives like to rule them out and then they'll do what they need to do when they're in office.
Look, I don't think the Labour Party's position is remotely credible, and I'll explain why. I think everyone knows that Conservatives' instinct, we haven't been able to do it recently because of the massive amount of public expenditure through the furlough scheme in COVID, but the instincts of the Conservative Party are to reduce tax when it is fiscally responsible to do so. The Labour Party are not in that position, but they're not telling us what they would actually do. And the problem with this approach is that the idea that they're going to get effectively Tory measures with Labour men and women, introducing them so that it's safe to vote Labour tax to cruise into number 10 on July the 5th. I don't think that's credible, and the job of Conservative candidates like me over the next week or so is to expose this fact that there is a big difference in tax. And as everyone will remember from before, the old adage, dogs bark, cats meow, and Labour puts up taxes. That's what the all of Conservatives under a Labour government.
No, what is Conservative Party about taxes when they need to? We had a tweet today, Conservative Party tweet today, and said, what would go up during Labour government? Tax. And then the word tax is repeated 6,207 times. We obviously have a long tweet there. Is that really going on from the party that has raised taxes so much? It makes the reality of difficult decisions that sometimes have to be taken on tax, and we're trying to reduce it to this accusation of taxes where we've done it yourself.
Well, I have to say I haven't seen the tweets, so I can't comment on that. But the fact remains that, the Tories' instinct, DNA, is always to reduce tax when it can possibly help, allow people to spend their own money on their own choices. And We have put up tax, you're entirely right, but that was because of the very responsible decisions of Prime Minister Kenny as the finance minister during COVID, when he introduced the bill that saved jobs and livelihoods and families during COVID. Those awful sort of wartime problems that COVID brought. £400 million spent on the best furlough scheme, but it was the right thing to do. Cannot escape the consequences of that, and that is why taxation has had to rise. Richard, write the reply.
Well, I think Andrew is the master of the understatement when he says that they haven't been able to cut taxes. Taxes are at a 70-year high, and it was the Conservatives who crashed the economy under Liz Truss, and that's why millions of people across our country are paying more on their mortgage or on their rent every single month because of the reckless and cavalier choices that the Conservatives took under Liz Truss. That's their legacy. What we're determined to do is support the next government. We're fighting hard every day is to make sure we get our economy back on a sustainable footing. And I would just say, none of these specific, whatever people think and whatever the cause, if they want to change, then they have to go out and vote for it on both July.
I want to raise a very specific question of taxes. One that hasn't been discussed in this. I know it's not your department, Andy Walsh, Richard Phillipson, but I'm interested in what your response to this is.
On neighbour.
Between now and 2035, we're moving to electric vehicles.
On neighbour. On neighbour message. On neighbour message.
Andrew Mitchell, your manifesto says you rule out road pricing, which might be seen as a way of getting motorists to pay the tax they're not paying on petrol tax. Your manifesto says that. You have campaign literature hitting Labour with the charge that they will introduce road pricing. Can I ask you, what is your plan as a party? Just thinking ahead a little bit.
What is it
as to what you do with the hole in the public finances when motorists are no longer paying petrol.
I
What
don't
is
know.
the plan?
Well, drink driving is not.
Well, you're
not okay.
entirely right that the impact from
Smoking
moving
and
to
driving.
electric cars, which we must
I
and
don't like it.
rightly
When they
will
do that, all
will
the
have that
chemicals
impact
on the road and all the
I think there
chemicals
needs
will
to
be
be a
washed and then down the drain and then into the river.
Fill that hole. It's got to be filled, and as of now, I'm afraid that there are no plans that we have to do that.
Well, why did your party attack the other party, which has also not shown plans in its manifesto, attacked the plans it doesn't have, but which it might need to introduce when it is conceded? You will have to be done if we see 25 million over driving it.
Well, if the Labour Party were to proceed with that, I entirely agree that it would be a very bad move to take. So if they were to do that, I completely agree with the response that you have received from the Conservatives.
What are you going to do about it? You ruled out the most obvious way of replacing attacking motorists, which is the charge of using the roads. Why you would rule that out when you just said we need a big debate about what the heck we're going to do when we lose £25 billion of revenue each year, and you're prejudging the debate to have an attack line against the other party.
Well, I'm not going to presume upon what the Chancellor of State would do and give you a knee-jerk reaction off the top of my head about this. I hope that the fact that I've been first,
and we need to sort it out.
I hope the fact that I've gone first will have given Bridget a moment to come up with an answer to your very clever question.
Well, Bridget Phillipson, do you have a thought about what we do when we lose £25 billion of tax revenue from motorists?
喺邊度對邊度而家？
I mean, the whole challenge around the transition from electric vehicles presents, both challenges for our country in terms of how we make sure we do it properly, sensibly, and
England打咗一個馬
behind it. But alongside that, it's a great opportunity. As a member of Parliament representing Sunderland, we've been at the forefront of developing that technology around electric vehicles.
You're avoiding the question. You're going to be missing a lot of tax. Wouldn't road pricing, which the Tories said would introduce, wouldn't that be the simplest way of replacing that lost revenue?
They're saying a lot of things about areas that Labour won't actually be taking in the action, won't be taking action in the way that they set out, and we've seen lots and lots of desperate advice right throughout this campaign. Of course, there is a longer-term policy shift that requires careful consideration. I do accept that, but any matters around taxation are those for the Chancellor, and I don't think you'd expect me to set out any plans around budgets, given that we haven't even...
澳洲對呢個 Belgium， 跟住 Slovakia 對 Romania。
entitled to say we can't have a sensible conversation about anything in this election campaign, in these TV debates.
Because we won't say.
會明年
I've got
㗎
this problem. We both said it's a serious
Is
issue.
it
We
is
both
Russia
said we
in
need to
Asia
resolve
or
it.
Europe?
Andrew
Europe.
Mitchell, we're no closer to hearing what either of the parties' even vaguest instincts
Uh-huh.
are about how to get
they didn't qualify or
Well,
couldn't
I think that
participate
the
either way.
critical point for candidates like me in this election
一係唔俾人，一係佢哋唔俾 Russia 踢，因為佢打緊仗；一係咧佢就係佢哋 qualify 唔到咯。
to your question. And it matters very much because some of the matters we're discussing today, like the betting and
因為烏克蘭冇俾人sanction 啊嘛，因為佢俾人打嗰個啊嘛，唔係打嗰個啊嘛，同埋佢 call 就算如果係 Russia 冇俾人 sanction 嘅話，佢都 qualify 唔到，即係佢入呢個 Euro 咧打呢個 tournament 咧，佢之前有 qualification， 因為好多個國家一齊打咁樣。
claims about the other party's policies. Bridget, do you feel a couple of genuinely having a useful debate on some of these big strategic questions we face in these debates and in this campaign?
Look, I think it's pretty hard to have a sensible and grown-up discussion about some of this when your opponents just make things up about what it is they claim that you believe or you intend to do. Our manifesto sets out in lots of detail the changes that we would make, how we would pay for them, and for example, how we'll make sure we've got safer streets, people can get the NHS back on its feet, and we'll get more teachers into our classrooms. Just some practical examples of the changes that a Labour government would make. The Conservatives have got nothing positive to say about the future of our country. They've had 14 years, and nothing now works better than it did when they first came to office. So, the choice that's on the ballot paper next week is whether people want to turn our country around and vote for change. But if they want that to happen, then the only way to do it is to go out and vote.
All British examples are examples of spending which are not covered by their
What?
budget.
Are fully funded and fully
Football?
funded, unlike your
England 咯
manifesto, wish list,
Football?
with not
Huh?
just a national level, just like the
Ball. Oh.
So the critical thing, what
I
Liz
don't know.
Truss did, Rishi, with great honesty and integrity, he lost the leadership of
conservative 即係煲唔可以再煲嘅，真係好恐怖嗰啲人。conservative 我唔想煲，但係 Labour 咧我又唔係咁想煲，我都唔知煲邊個。Green 更加唔想煲 ，Green 都唔想煲。Green. They want the better environment instead of everything else.
He lost the election, he was right. He came in, he put it right, and he's now led to great economic success in reducing the level of inflation. That will bring down interest rates. There's nothing more important to young people who want to get on the housing ladder, who are on the housing ladder, than seeing a reduction in the mortgage
Yeah.
rates, okay?
Yeah, they wouldn't say it, but what they propose to do is something like that.
We need to move on this program rather than ahead of the leaders debate today. Now, 21 minutes past 5, and Charles can give us some more.
Outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has been appointed as the next head of NATO. NHS bosses have warned that patients could face major disruption in England as
Also,
fewer
Jonah.
doctors prepare to start a 5-day
Bye-bye.
strike tomorrow. And the FA has said that Phil Foden has temporarily left the England camp at the European Championships for a pressing family matter. The midfielder has started all of England's games in Germany so far.
Thanks, Charles. Now, PM is in Gedling to Borough, just outside Nottingham. We're 3 miles from the debate in Nottingham. It was all just coincidence, by the way, not a plan, not that clever. We have a makeshift studio for the day here in the town of Arnold within Gedling. We're tucked away at the Arnold Methodist Church in fact. Now, this constituency is a Conservative Labour margin, a Conservative one. Last time, but we're only 2,500 votes ahead of Labour, and Labour have won the previous 3 elections here, so it's really one of Labour's top 20 targets. The other parties, Lib Dem, Reform or Brexit as it was, and Green were a long way behind last time. None got 5% of the vote. Now, I caught up with a PM listener in this seat this morning who'd been involved in organising a hustings, and he told me about the local issues.
I'm Graham Bennett. I'm a self-employed business consultant, and I've lived in Gedling for about 27 years. The big talking points tend to be potholes, the general state of the roads, and the other thing that tends to come up is cost of living, challenges with cost of living crisis. And also, a lot of people are worried about getting doctor's appointments and how they reach out and get healthcare that they need. Are potholes particularly bad in Gedling? It does seem to be a particular issue. In fact, there is somebody who's actually published the Gedling pothole calendar.
Graham Bennett, listener there. How's the campaign been going here? Hugh Caswell is political reporter of BBC Radio Nottingham, and he sent us this voice note about it.
Gedling has a bit of everything. It hooks the eastern edge of Nottingham City, but you can really sense the coal mining heritage of the area as well, and it quickly starts to feel quite rural within 15 minutes drive. Politically, it had been held by Labour since the 97 landslide, but never with a majority of more than a few thousand. And when the Conservatives won it in 2019, there were only 600 odd votes in it. But given it is, at least on paper, a marginal seat, it's quite striking that there's been precious little campaigning from big-name Tories. In fact, across the whole of my patch, Nottinghamshire, at least to my knowledge, it's taken until today and the penultimate week of the campaign for any cabinet members to show up. That is in sharp contrast to Labour, who've had shadow cabinet members visiting the county on a pretty regular basis.
Hugh Caswell at BBC Radio Nottingham. Now, Gedling is a great place to come to understand the way our economy.
你有冇嘢要我喺呢度？
That's gone. Things have changed. The newer towns are often not in Gedling itself, but in the city.
咁你想我而家去邊？我6:3翻到去接下寶馬之間有冇地方去啊？過嚟即係邊？你鋪頭。跟住咧？
It's a large area just on the outskirts. Despite the playground,
佢喺度，佢今日喺度。
and they've converted it into basically a residential facility for families and also for housing.
哇咩？佢仲強。
So in many ways,
我細佬。邊個？我強仔啊。Okay.
On measured things like activity rates, types of jobs people are doing, the Office for National Statistics has a been similar to the national average. There are my work is still not in my area, I is now less than 1%. And so it is a story of deindustrialisation, although manufacturing remains slightly higher in terms of employment compared to other.
We're standing on a mine. We're not mining much coal these days. What has happened to the economy of Gedling? How has it kept it away?
So the mine closed here in the 1990s, along with others in the Nottinghamshire area, and you've seen a gradual move towards services. So Nottingham has attracted major service employees that have regional and national headquarters of companies like Beyond Energy Gas, going to offshore building companies, Speedo, I think the challenge though is that it's rather similar to other regional cities across the country. We know those
globally traded international services in London, top law firms and banks in the world. It doesn't defeat the ability of regional cities like Nottingham from being able to match their international clients.
Yeah, so we know that the UK is one of the most economically open countries in that world. Similar for services, and that's clearly not going to compete with London. So I think the major challenge is to stimulate growth, and then I think where does that potentially need to take place, or where could it take place, I think I would be looking at messages across the moment, and then the by extension then what the same places like that.
That's a segue.
Well, it's actually a couple of things that they're, a couple of issues that they're looking at, helium leak being one, and thruster issues being the other. The aircraft is safe. They technically could come home, but why? They are taking this time while they're in space to troubleshoot the issues, see if they can fix the issues, at the same time testing out other things that they can do as targets of opportunity while they're there. The original return date wasn't that far earlier in that date, and then so it has slipped. And if all goes well, they'll be able to fix everything that's going wrong, but they'll definitely know more about it.
Susan, is there a plan B? I mean, I suppose it couldn't be good for both, but involved in the Elon Musk spacecraft.
Always has a plan B. NASA doesn't like being one failure away, losing astronauts or spaceships or anything like that. So there's always enough seats up there to get everybody home safely. And there are. There's a Dragon, there's a Soyuz, now there's a Starliner. There are enough seats there. If at any given time one of those meetings I will send another one up. Of course, this time we didn't send another Starliner, but I would send probably a Dragon, absolutely. So, they're safe, and they'll get back safely.
You're not sounding worried about the well-being of what are they up to while they're there? How comfortable are they? In the International Space Centre, obviously they probably haven't been anticipating they'll have two guests for so long. What would be the setup there?
Oh, they're definitely comfortable up there, and oftentimes there are guests, like when Axiom goes up in a Dragon, and there are places for these astronauts to sleep and food to eat, oxygen to breathe. Sonny and Butch wake up every day pinching themselves that they're still in space and they still get to maybe help out with the science, maybe help the space station crew get ready for their EVAs. So there's not really any concern there.
Okay, well, I'm glad Susan, there's no concern, and a little bit more time after the space before we from NASA. Thank you so much. Well, talk about exploring space. Let's talk about exploring something.
Mavericks is on the road again, or I should say off the road again. Hi there, George Exploding Tree. Alright. Hi there. Wild walks through the countryside in Carrick.
I think this place is kind of defocusing my imagination.
Never like before. Like going for a walk. New series of ramblings with me, Claire Baldwin.
This is tiny enough.
From Radio 4 and on BBC Sounds now.
Never allowed to be bored. On that theme coming up, I understand it. I'm not going to back away from it. The most important thing here is that the supporters stay with the team. England fans disappointed by another so-called boring game. We're going to be going from 8 and 12. No matter boring is really that. But right now, it is 28 minutes. Next, we're listening to the end. We'll have a summary of the from Charles. Rishi
Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer are preparing to take part in their final head-to-head leaders' election debate this evening. The two men are expected to face questions during the BBC debates about an investigation by the Gambling Commission, which is looking into
The masses of people who've turned out may decrease, but we've had some reaction already from prominent activists who have basically dismissed Mr. Ruto's step. They've said, well, this is a PR gesture. Will he be able to bring back our dead? This is, he's got another agenda. Don't trust him. We'll see you out on the streets tomorrow.
Barbara Natasha in Kenya, thanks for that. Now it's 12 minutes to 6, and we'll have a last look at some other headlines from Charles in London.
The Princess Royal's husband, Sir Tim Lawrence, says she's recovering slowly after suffering a mild head injury and concussion at her home in Gloucestershire. It's thought Princess Anne was hurt by a horse. A man who threw objects towards Nigel Farage while he was campaigning in Barnsley has admitted using threatening behaviour, and 6 women's rights protesters have been arrested in Rome for throwing red paint over one of the city's most popular tourist attractions, the Spanish Steps.
Thanks, Charles. Now, being here in Gedling, the Gedling constituency today gives us a chance to talk about something quite significant that has changed in the years of Conservative government. The introduction of regional or metro mayors, folks like Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester, or Andy Street, who had the job in the West Midlands until last month. Now, these posts are rolled out case by case, region by region, each with an individually negotiated power. It's been a Tory policy introduced by Osborne, but it's one that Labour say they will build upon. Now, we're in the East Midlands today, which happens to have a brand spanking new metro mayor, Labour's Claire Ward, elected last month, first person in that place. I spoke to her about whether the regional mayor idea should go further.
I think there needs to be more devolution. I think there needs to be more deals across the country so that other areas get the benefit of being able to make what works for their areas, and that's what we don't have. So I think there's huge opportunities for a future Labour government, if we have one coming, or a Conservative government. And let's be clear that there has been accepted practice of mayors and devolution across both parties. I would like to see, if we get a Labour government, I'd like to see them supercharge that. And I'd like us to have the relationships that shows them that we are here to make representations of the part of our place. Above all, everything else, it is our place first.
I think you would probably recognise, and there's probably evidence to support this, that the public's eyes glaze over when you talk to them about things like constitutional change, devolution in England. They really just, I don't care who does, those things done properly by somebody, right? I mean, do you find that as a metro mayor, no one is terribly interested, or are people very interested?
I don't think people generally are interested in the wider. They're not interested in that constitutional. Let's not say that what they want is the delivery. And what we know from the existing mayoral authorities that are well established is that they are really good at that delivery and that they are making a difference. And we need to look across those established combined authorities with mayors, and they have got better figures when it comes to economic growth. They are taking control in terms of transport, so there's lots of good things.
And I think you're talking about Birmingham in Greater Manchester, Ben Houchin, the Tory Ben Houchin in Teesside. Oh, you're pulling your face.
Not just in West Midlands, absolutely. Absolutely. So that has been, look at the figures, you can see that there are differences in those areas that have combined authorities. And what I'm saying is that there is an opportunity for the delivery by national government in those regions to be heightened by having that local control.
Now, you've only been in post for 6 weeks, so you're not really thinking about your legacy yet. I'm really interested in if you could tell me something you've done in the 6 weeks you've been in post. Is there something anyone would notice? Give me an example.
Our challenge, of course, is that we're actually building the authority at the same time. So brand new, we have the office until I walked through the door, and they were still unpacking the boxes on the first day. So we're also in that process of building the organisation while trying to do things. And when the general election came along, we were also caught by Purdah. So what
冇喺拍
We
咯
talk to
就
people about my pledges on young people. I want to get young people involved in how to shape
係啊，但係拍一陣啫嘛，
I
拍捉到
announced
細
that I will be
哥哥出嚟，跟住即刻走。
you're interested in an active travel ambassador. So somebody who can help us to connect our communities with walking and cycling as well. But also, we've made a decision just last week that I'll be announcing where we're going to put the £16.8 million of brownfield homes development. So where we're going to have those new homes in the next couple of years. So there's some good things, and there'll be even more when the restrictions are further are lifted and I can make up an announcement.
General election have restrictions on 2 million locally. How many people locally do you think, out of interest, would know your name?
Well, I think it's early days, and I've also got to recognise that the turnout in the election in May was only 27%. So if we took it just on that basis, that would suggest that about a third of the population know my name. I intend to work on that over the next 4 years.
The regional mayor, Claire Ward, talking to the regional mayor, something Labour and Conservative parties. Now, are England supporters being harsh on Gareth Southgate and his squad in Germany? It's even topped their group, and yesterday against Slovenia, England had possession for 3/4 of the game. They had 12 shots, 4 on target. There were 6 corners, but there were no goals. And fans have been harsh in their assessment that the game was boring. But does that matter? If it's boring for your route to victory, let us speak to BBC presenter, Guardian columnist, former and sometimes football pundit Adrian Child. I mean, Adrian, first of all, were you bored by the game?
I was bored, but I was also bored with everybody saying how bored they are. I'm bored with people be surprised at how underwhelmed they are when we're always underwhelmed. It's like we can't back to a golden age when England was rumbunctious and, playing brilliantly. But if we think of the last 30 years, how many times have we seen England really be scintillating and great? I think of against Holland in 96 and qualifying in 2001, beating Germany 5-1 in Munich. A couple of other times. Usually it's not like that, yet we expect it to be like that.
I'm not an expert, Adrian, but to me it looks like a much more passing game. And there were something like 750 England passes yesterday. They do seem to be passing the ball empty. So I'm not an expert. But I thought that was what we were meant to be doing more of.
But in the end, you've got to find a way through.
Some of those messages included explosive images. Labour says it has suspended a party member after being informed of the arrest. More from our political correspondent, Deadline.
It was first reported in April that several men at Westminster, politicians, both Labour and Conservative, parliamentary staff and journalists, had been targeted by flirtatious, unsolicited WhatsApp messages from mysterious figures calling themselves Charlie or Admiral. Some were asked to send explicit images of themselves. A bizarre story that many assumed was a classic honey trap scam. The motivation for the messages wasn't known, and still isn't. Well, we know who was behind it. Police have been investigating these messages since last year. Labour said it has suspended a party member after being notified of their arrest in Islington, the first time the party was made aware of suspicion concerning the individual. Labour says it won't comment further due to the ongoing police investigation.
The final election vote should see that continuous harm these cases. BBC or highlight as questions about betting Conservatives and Labour who support their candidates. Commission in relation to Mason Bell's yesterday. Here's our political correspondent.
The row over betting has overshadowed the Conservative campaign for the best part of a fortnight and raised questions about the relationship between gambling and politics. Home Secretary James Cleverly admitted recent events have been a distraction, but said the gambling watchdog should be left to do its work.
We don't know yet whether any existing rules have been broken or
them do their job and we'll listen to what they say very carefully once they conclude.
The Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey, has called for an urgent review of the regulations to establish what politicians...
But the police reaction added to the pressure on Mr. Ruto. They killed more than 20 people and injured many more. Religious and social organizations here and Kenya's international partners condemned the violence and urged restraint. The president's climb down may ease the dangerous tensions in the country, but some prominent activists have dismissed the move as too little too late, a public relations gesture, and vowed to return to the streets.
An investigation is underway after a 4-year-old boy was left behind at a wildlife park like his nursery. Carson Montpulek was on a trip to the Scottish Deer Centre in Fife when his group left without him. His mother says he was found behind by a man who alerted staff at the centre. Our Scotland correspondent Ben Phillips reports.
Before leaving the wildlife park, children have been asked to go to the toilet.
今日點啊嗰個？係啊，跳舞嗰度點啊？
Mother Claire Ford said the teachers only returned with her son 40 minutes after being alerted by the centre. Despite the incident has astounded, accused nursery staff of not carrying out a head count. Ms. Ford said there were only 9 children on the trip. The worst part was that despite them being accompanied by 3 teachers, they had still managed to lose their son unaware. Told that minimum of 2 head counts should have been done prior to leaving the centre. Prime Council said it was treating the matter extremely seriously. Policies and procedures to see the
The analysis is based on visits we know about since the campaign began. Here's BBC Verify's Nick Irving.
Leaders' visits give us a sense of where the parties are focusing their attention and their resources, and the evidence shows that Rishi Sunak is fighting an extremely defensive campaign. In the first month, 90% of the visits we made were to areas where the Tories won in 2019. Not only that, some of the places that we knew the past 10 days are areas where Conservatives should be comfortable. Like in Vaughan and Lincolnshire, where there's a notional majority of around 22,000 people. Knowledge and Tavistock in Devon had a public vote of 2,900. We're using notional majority because the boundary map was changed in 2018. It is clear that Mr. Sunak is spending some of his valuable campaigning time on traditional safe staff. Neither meanwhile is party its tanks on the way. Some of them have had significant notional majorities, such as Red West and Berkshire. The same is true for the Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey, who dedicated 95% of his visits to Tory seats, many of them in the so-called Blue Wall, previously safe seats in the southeast and the southwest of England. All of it paints a picture of the Conservatives in defensive mode, Labour and the Liberal Democrats on the attack.
2 of the 5 main parties in Northern Ireland have published their election manifestos. The Ulster Unionist Party said it was confident of making a return to the House of Commons after an absence of 7 years. National Labour increased the federal 2 seats. Here's our Ireland correspondent Chris Page.
The Ulster Unionist Party was the most powerful political force in Northern Ireland for 80 years, but it hasn't had any MPs since 2017. The UUP's best chance in this election is going to be in Southampton, which will be the Democratic Unionist Party. But the leader, Doug Beattie, said the party was in the hunt for of the 18 constituencies in this part of the UK. The manifesto proposes to strengthen trade links with Great Britain. There's also a focus on defence. Mr. Beattie, who's a former soldier, said Northern Ireland's strategic group should be enhanced, starting with the re-establishment of an RAF base.
A minute on this, the culture of being covered and water performance, and the intercepted powers of the Great Far law. The same can be said with our naval assets. We need to be able to deploy naval assets or NATO naval assets in Northern Ireland.
The Social Democratic Labour Party is on the other side of the constitutional debate. It used to be the ruling party of Irish nationalism, but was overtaken by Sinn Féin around 20 years ago. Sinn Féin and cons, but the SDLP does. The SDLP leader, Columnist, would emphasise that difference, and also the party's next Sir Keir Starmer.
Obviously, we can learn things from the other parties here, because we're the other sister party, and we've developed significant connections there. They've made promises for this place to do good ultimately concerning that. And the reality is,
Also, in the SDLP manifesto, plans to improve the funding model for Northern Ireland and to reform the law of the institutions.
possible on Robinson. Robinson expensive over. In addition to the county championship, Robinson was playing Sussex against the Leicestershire Division 2 for 2 sixes, 6 fours, 3 of which were no balls, and a single by Lewis from back. Gareth Southgate has insisted on outcomes with his management style. The team went through to the last 16 of Europe top of their group, and so supporters still have questions after unimpressive performances like the Wolves so far. But there has been no pitch and the Australia, cheering supporters after he was freed in a plea deal by an American court. Protestants laughed at a partner, Mark Norman,
And as we heard in the news, Michelle Hussain chairs the head-to-head debates between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer this evening. The Prime Ministerial debate comes live from Nottingham. It's at 8:15 on Radio 4 and BBC 7. In a moment, we'll be fully unpacking muscularity versus femininity for you in Sturdy World Cup. That's after a word about Saturday morning.
As it's summer, everyone's outside quality, but not me. I think it's
cover in James. Here's a man who turned up first in 1996 to just minutes of gold. It's also the summer of Taylor Swift, but before the selling tours of the film, she was, I found her first appearance in the BBC. Rewind that. On Radio 4. Starts this Saturday morning.
Now on Radio 4, the comedy series about big strong ladies doing unregulated things.
In this series, I'm looking at women who and we're getting stuck in the rest. The first recorded Olympic wrestling was in the ancient games of 708 BC. It was about athleticism and strategy and strength, but it always attracted huge crowds of fans, and it must have been exciting, because back then keeping records didn't just mean writing stuff down. This was pre-quill. You had to carve records into stone. So for all we know, golf could have been an ancient sport, but the Assyrians were like, oh, I can't be asked to get a chisel out for this one. I think it's fair to say that Olympic wrestling is a pretty tiny sport in the UK. We know it's more of a big deal in America, because every single high school movie is really a job for wrestling. Only Americans get confidence to dress their romantic lead up like a soldier downstairs wearing a wig.
好慘！睇，哥哥，塞到呢度，做咩事啊？超級塞啊！我哋翻唔翻到屋企啊，哥哥？係喎，我哋頭先翻嚟嗰時就係咁塞喎。喂，頭先出去嗰時。Oh no! Can we go home? Can we go home? Can we go home?
Its primary aim is entertainment. America has done wrestling exactly this one. As a child, I did get the WWF wrestling stick. The universe there giving me a hint that one day in the future I would become a fan. But as someone who's never actually watched wrestling, there's a strong chance that the thing I
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
I do remember seeing one wrestler in those stickers though, which I think was pretty shocking because they were very definitely a thin. It's just that alongside the rest of the Western world, the 90s was undergoing its own wrestling specific
所以幾開心嘅。
Because I was a teenager then, and that's how my parents referred to that time. Despite me not growing up with wrestling, the best partner I've ever had three things in common. A dad who's keen to discuss road travel in detail. A mum who's got cardies with jigsaw. And a huge love of wrestling. So it's been in my peripheral sphere of interest now for years. So when he came through, when the amazing sketch double act Maxim Ivan asked me to be involved with the comedians wrestling at the Edinburgh Fringe that year, I jumped at the chance. It's a biannual, one night only fringe spectacular, always sold out to over 1,000 people, where comedians and wrestlers combine for a whole night of amazing matches. Me, Hughie Pritchard McLean, Ivo Graham, Sophie Duker and Nick Helm were that year's comedy conscripts. And within half an hour